Good morning, friends. Yohaan Philip here again, and this morning we are in Acts chapter 12, and it's quite a again another dramatic story which we now probably now used to going through the book of Acts, and lot more dramatic stories to come ahead. And this morning I'd like to kind of look at the two men who are involved with the story. The first one being James, and the second one being Peter. And if you look at the Apostle James, who sadly gets killed at the start of this story. James was the brother of John. He was with Jesus at the Mount of Transfiguration. If you remember, he asked. He was called. They were called the sons of thunder, James and John, and he wanted a place of prominence in God's kingdom. And Jesus said to him, he did not despise or put down James's desire for greatness, but he said that he gave him the way to greatness is through suffering and through serving. And here we see that this dear brother James, an apostle, suffers and indeed dies for the sake of Jesus. And I'm from India, and my parents are still in India. My dad is involved with the church planting movement, which goes into rural India, and they plant lots of churches. And he's always telling me stories of lots of men and women who lose their lives. Pastors, men who go and preach and share the gospel and start churches. There's been a change of government in India over the past few years, which has been very anti-Christianity, a strong Hindu agenda, and it's resulted in persecution of Christians and men and women losing their lives for the sake of the gospel, happening today. And all around the world, not just in India. There's different places where people are being persecuted and losing their lives for the sake of the gospel. But we know that is not the end of their story. Indeed, they get to be with Jesus, and I'm sure there's great honor on them for suffering, for indeed dying for the sake of the gospel. And we see this is James's story when Jesus said to him, it's through suffering and serving that you will achieve greatness. He's probably a really great man in heaven, and we look forward to seeing him in his greatness in heaven one day. But then contrast that with Peter. And there's a really interesting detail in this story, which I hope we didn't miss, which talks about Peter's execution being delayed because it was the time of the Passover. And where have we read about that before in the Bible? It was at Jesus' own crucifixion, and his just before his death. The Jews did not want to kill Jesus because it was the time of the Passover, so they wanted to delay his death. And what was Peter doing around this time? He was disowning Jesus. He was saying, "I have nothing to do with this man." He fled. He ran away. And here we are again at the time of Passover. And what is Peter doing? He is ready to suffer and die. He hasn't run away from Jesus. He's been through a tremendous journey since Jesus restored him on that seashore many years ago, as we read in the Gospels. And he's come to a place where he hasn't abandoned his faith. He hasn't abandoned Jesus. He's seen the resurrected Jesus. He's been filled with the Holy Spirit. And you see the tremendous power of God's grace in people's lives, where he takes people who've, like me, probably like some of us watching this video, who've just made terrible decisions, horrible mistakes, like Peter, just abandoned Jesus, and Jesus forgives and restores and gives opportunity to demonstrate our faithfulness to Jesus. And it's tremendous. This is just such a wonderful story of God's grace. And Peter gets rescued, and he survives. And so there's, I guess, when as Christians we should expect persecution. Sometimes we may not come out of the persecution, we may not come out of the suffering, and sometimes we will get rescued, and we will come out on the other side. And whilst Peter was in jail, imprisoned, waiting for his execution, the believers were praying were praying earnestly for him, for his release. And you see the power of prayer. That Peter was rescued in such a dramatic way. The angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord rescues, and then it goes to the third man in this story, Herod, who the angel of the Lord struck him dead. There was clearly God's judgment on somebody whose pride had come in the way, and he'd escalated himself to a position of deity in his own eyes. And the angel of the Lord, one of the angels rescued Peter. This angel struck this proud man down. And we don't want to be men and women of pride. We want to be men and women who are full of the grace of God, who are fully captivated by Jesus and full of His Holy Spirit, and absolutely dependent on Him through suffering, through persecution, through whatever situation we are going through. May you be blessed by these stories. May you be encouraged by this wonderful chapter in the book of Acts.